psychologist and transpersonal psychologist, and have been working with astrology, numerology, tarot, all kinds of intuitive symbol systems, oh, I don't know, for 45 years, longer actually, since I'm 65. So yeah, over 50 years, I guess. So please settle in. One of the things that we're going to be focusing on this coming day is how to get a view of what's coming in 2021, but we're also going to be focusing in on what have you learned in 2020, because whatever positive learnings you've received about yourself, about humanity, about life in general, those are going to be especially important over the next few days and especially into 2021. I'll be getting more into that. But if you can come up with one thought, one line of one positive learning, write that in the chat. It might be very useful for us to reflect a little bit on some of the positive learnings we've received during a very challenging year, which some of you who were with me last year on January 12th, when Pluto and Saturn went exactly conjunct, which gave us a preview of the challenges that we're going to be facing right now. It's interesting now in retrospect to look at. So now that we know that those challenges of Pluto and Saturn, Pluto being the lord of the underworld, death and rebirth, Saturn being the lord of ruler of the universe, the structures and bare bones of society, how society and power and our relationship to power have really been a focus for the last year, and including all of the institutions in society, how those have been challenged. So we've been personally challenged, we've been emotionally challenged, our ideas have been challenged, as well as society at large, locally, nationally, and internationally, with the pandemic, obviously, with COVID-19, and economics and many other challenges. So amidst these challenges, most certainly your soul had something in mind for you to be born at this time. So think about one positive learning that you gained during this last year and just write that in the chat. We have a few more minutes before we actually begin in earnest. And I'll probably repeat what I just said for the sake of those coming in later. And Natalie, I'm going to hand it over to you. And you
Great. Yeah, we can see people jumping in. And I am communicating a little bit to all of you as you get on to go ahead and chat me any questions you have as we go. I'll be monitoring the chat dialogue, and Dr. Hedva will be doing the speaking and the teaching. She's sharing her screen right now, so that's how we're going to also be communicating a lot of the information. So you should be seeing sort of names or faces just on the side edge of your panel, but mostly what you're seeing is Dr. Hedva's computer screen and her presentation. So if you do have questions as we go, or if Dr. Hedva asks us, I know she's going to ask us to share some learnings, we can all share that via the chat, and that'll just help keep things moving along quickly. It'll keep background noises out of the way if everybody's on mute. So I'll just copy and paste that little message to you in the chat so that you all see where the chat is, in case you're not as familiar with Zoom, although I know a lot of us are getting more and more familiar all the time.
Maybe that's one of the positive learnings from this last year.
Positive learning. I know how to use Zoom really well. Good. Yeah, it's great. So just seeing more and more people coming on here. And we've still got about a minute before we start. I imagine that we'll be starting on time. Oh yeah, it's really great seeing lots of people jump in. So like I was saying, I'm going to be managing the chat. So if you want to chat questions as we go, nice, Aurora, I acknowledge how resilient you are. I love that. Yeah, I'll be managing this. I'll be keeping it pretty quiet. And Dr. Hedva will be doing the speaking, but if something does come up, if there's some clarification that's needed, you can chat that over to me, and I will try to interrupt sparingly and keep us all flowing together. So we are at 3:30, and I'm gonna pass that over to you, Dr. Hedva, and just manage one or two messages here for some participants.
Very good. Thank you so much, Natalie. And thank you to you, Natalie, and to Yoga Nova for inviting me to come and share with you some information about how to approach 2021. What can we anticipate? And how do we bring ourselves forward from this most challenging year, 2020, into 2021? I would like to ask you, if you're joining right now for the first time, just to introduce myself first. I'm Dr. Beth Hedva. Some of you, of course, know me. Some of you may not have met me yet. I am both a clinical psychologist and transpersonal psychologist, and I've been practicing using astrology, numerology, tarot, and all kinds of symbol systems for over 50 years now. I'm going to ask you to please turn your phones off if you have your phone on. Turn off any background noise. Keep yourself on mute so that the sound is easy for all of us. And thank you so much for joining me today. So we're going to start by looking at 2021. Natalie is going to be manning the chat. If you have any questions, please put them in. And Natalie, I invite you to interrupt me anytime because I can get going on a roll here. And it's important for there to be a dialogue and also to have some exchange of information with each other. I have also asked Natalie to notice the chat focusing on, for right now as we begin, one positive learning that you had as a result of 2020. If you joined me a year ago when Pluto and Saturn went exactly conjunct, we knew this was going to be a very challenging year, focusing in on issues of power, right use of power, misuse of power, empowerment from the inside out. And also, how is that impacting us personally, professionally, in our society, in our local communities, and globally? And so we've faced all kinds of issues around that, as well as, of course, being Lord of Death and Rebirth, Pluto. It's not a surprise that we've had to deal with something like the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as all kinds of issues around finances, government, banking, commerce. Those are all associated with Saturn and the sign of Capricorn, where these events were happening. Right now, today, I'm just going to go forward. We have some really interesting events happening astrologically that are really worth paying attention to. So some of you may already have heard of the Great Conjunction. This is when Saturn and Jupiter align from our perspective on Earth. This happens every 20 years, and it's a chance for us to reorient, to expand, and create new strategies on how it is that we are going to approach our lives for the next cycle, a 20-year cycle. Now, it so happens that in addition to Saturn and Jupiter going conjunct, exactly conjunct on solstice, Saturn will be actually moving from Capricorn, which, as I said before, is associated with government, with the structures, the bare bones of society. How is it that we organize? How do we execute and implement our plans, our strategies? It's moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. And Aquarius is a very different energy than the energy of Capricorn. Capricorn is about structure and form, rules, regulations, following the rules, keeping a structure of order. Aquarius, instead of being top down and hierarchical, Aquarius is more collective, more about understanding our aspirations, our visions, our dreams. And so, how is it that we come together in order to get a new vision, a new dream, a new aspiration, not just for society, but the place of the individuals who have unique contributions to give and to bring forward into society. That's really what Aquarius is about. Because it's going conjunct at 0 degrees Aquarius on solstice, many have suggested that this is actually the seed planting or the beginning of what some people think of as the age of Aquarius. Now, I've talked about the age of Aquarius many times, and from my perspective, we've been in a transition to this long cycle, precessional change of ages, which happens about every 2,200 years, 2,150 years or so. And we have a period of time where we're experiencing the old and the new simultaneously. That's called a cusp period for those of you who are familiar with astrology. I realize that we have people with some who have even more background in astrology here today, some who have more background in numerology. So I'm hoping that what you receive today will add to and expand what it is you already know, whether you already have a lot of experience or even just a little experience. So that's happening on the 21st, this change from a focus in our thinking. We're going to, Aquarius is an air sign. So Jupiter and Saturn entering into Aquarius is a change in our thinking, a fundamental shift in our view, our ideals, our visions for humanity and aspirations. Now, the thing that's interesting is that these seeds that are being planted now for 20 years, it also happens to be a cycle that extends really from a 200-year cycle. And I'll be going into that in just a moment. So we're actually planting seeds not just for the next 20 years, but what is it that we will be wanting to see happening for the next 200 years? Now, the prep for this is especially interesting because today, we're December 13th, 2020. Jupiter happens to be at 28 degrees Capricorn. Saturn is at 29 degrees Capricorn. Tomorrow happens to be a solar eclipse, a full solar eclipse. Now, the thing about this is a picture, by the way, of an ephemeris where we can find out where everything is. And I want to say, if you're an astrologer, you might really enjoy this particular page. I also want to mention that I am not getting any kickback from any of the resources that I'm sharing with you. These just happen to be resources that I use. And Chaldea.com, you can calculate where were the stars at any time in history just by placing in the times and dates here. And so the thing about December 14th, it happens to be a full solar eclipse in the southern hemisphere. It also happens to be a solar eclipse that's happening on the south node in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is that planetary and zodiacal aspect that is offering us a vision and a view of a universal truth, a greater understanding, a spiritual philosophy of what are we here for. With the moon, the luminary of the moon going on top of the north node at 23 degrees, 8 degrees Sagittarius. Now, let me tell you why that's kind of significant. If you imagine Sagittarius with his bow and arching his bow back and setting his arrow loose to intersect somewhere way out into space at around 27 degrees Sagittarius, that arrow ends up landing into the galactic center of our view from Earth out into space. The galactic center is a very significant point that, for many more esoteric astrologers, suggest this is the point of the greatest cross-cultural, highest ethical, universal truths and principles. If we aim towards that direction, We're accessing the wisdom and information from the greater universe and from the galaxy, the center of the galaxy. And we know that the center of our Milky Way galaxy happens to be a black hole. So I like to think of the Milky Way galaxy as the center and symbol of our universe and our perspective here on Earth. And I personally really honor and recognize, as we've translated those symbols, a Milky Way with a black hole at the center as two beautiful symbols of the Divine Mother, that our universe is a nourishing, nurturing place for life and for human life on our little planet here called planet Earth. And we can receive from the center of the universe the energy that allows us to be reborn at this time in history. I'd like to mention that this is a philosophical perspective for all of us who are here today and all of us who happen to be born on the planet at this time. One philosophical view is that it's not an accident that we're here now. We actually chose to be here to bring in something new, to bring in a vision and a perspective, a spiritual philosophy that can enhance our relationship to the universe at large, to ourselves, to each other, to all of life on the planet. And so the fact that the solar eclipse is close to this point at 23 degrees, 8 minutes Sagittarius is especially significant because it becomes an opportunity for us tomorrow on December 14th to plant seeds for what it is that we would like to be born in our lives. Anytime there's a new moon, we can do this every month if you're into doing lunar ritual. On the new moon, it's a good time to set your intention of what it is you seek to create in your life. Right now, it's because it's so close to the galactic center, it's a good time to envision not only what you want in your life, but also in the lives of your loved ones and the lives of your community and the lives of all of life on our planet and our relationship to each other and those cross-cultural universal ethical principles. What's also one more piece that's interesting to note is that this is going conjunct also the South Node. And the South Node is the node that represents karma. So for some of us, it'll be a chance to retrieve lost and hidden resources from previous incarnations that we're able to bring forward to renew ourselves in the coming period of time. For others, it could be if they haven't done their karmic cleanup homework, life could become a little more challenging even as this becomes a time to awaken and illuminate what it is that needs to be revealed that has been concealed so it can be healed. That's the basis of what is happening tomorrow. So set your intention on what it is that you wish to heal for yourself, your loved ones and intimates, your community and society, and for all of life on our planet. That is preparation, actually, for December 21st, which is when Saturn, this is what I just said, when Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius. At that time, then, on solstice, when it is the time of greatest darkness around us in the northern hemisphere, when it's the time of greatest light in the southern hemisphere, it's a very auspicious time to once again focus intention. And the intention that we're focusing now is really about how are we expanding? Jupiter is the principle of expansion. Our ideas and our thinking, that's what Aquarius is about, in order to create new structures and strategies, that's Saturn, that can be implemented over the next 20 years in service of humanity. Now, Saturn and Jupiter, as I mentioned before, do go into alignment every 20 years. The last time they were this close together happens to have been 400 years ago. Right now, Jupiter and Saturn they're only going to be less than a couple lunar diameters away from each other. I think it's like a fifth of a diameter away. The last time they were this close, 400 years ago, they were also um, in, at that time, opposite where they are now in the sign of Leo. And that was in 1623. The last time they were in Aquarius was basically 800 years ago. Now, the thing that's interesting about these large cycles of time is over the last 200 years, and I know you probably, some of you may be astrologers, some maybe not, but around 200 years ago in 1842, Jupiter went conjunct in Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. And so the last 200 years, basically, we have been expanding our thinking, but more than that, how do we act in the world in concrete, practical ways? The last 200 years were led by Capricorn. So that has to do with the last 200 years, we've been looking at social structure, hierarchy. Saturn is about strategy, structure, discipline, executive ability. And not surprising, when we look at what's been happening in the world for the last couple hundred years, there's been a real focus on politics, business, banking, corporations, government, rules and regulations. How do we achieve status and standing in the public sphere? What are our contributions in relationship to society? And how is our relationship to authority? That's what the last couple hundred years have been about. Interestingly enough, the last conjunction 20 years ago was in the sign of Taurus. So we've been going conjunct from Capricorn to Virgo and into Taurus, and then it repeats. So basically, Taurus specifically, the last 20 years have really been focused on finances and security, and also how are we nourishing and nurturing ourselves in a real concrete way, taking care of business. That's been really the focus for the last 20 years. We're moving now on the 21st into new thinking, new ideas. Air is all about, earth signs are about boundaries and structure. Air, there are no boundaries. It fills up all of the space. Whatever the structure or container is, air will fill it, it will conform to it. Aquarius is associated particularly with idealism and social consciousness, egalitarianism, collectivism, collaborative relationship through our groups and our associations. It's the idea of community and what are our aspirations and dreams for our communities, for humanity at large. And so I have to say, we're planting seeds this solstice, not just for the next 20 years, like how do we want to transition over the next 20 years, but these are the seeds that we're planting for the next 200 years. And this is especially important. You'll be knowing as we go into the numbers, the numerology of it, it'll make even more sense to you. Before we go too far, I just want to show you that this is another way of saying Jupiter conjunct Saturn. We can say it in English. You'll notice we've got words. We can say it through symbols of astrological glyphs, or we can also understand what that means by looking at the tarot. Now, the tarot happens to be one of my favorite symbol systems because it integrates numerology, astrology, mythology, and the ancient wisdom teachings that were transmitted through story, through legend. It also includes the symbology of color, the tree of life from my own tradition, the Hebraic tradition, the Jewish tradition. It includes an understanding of all of the ancient wisdom teachings codified in symbols, images, and pictures. And one of the things about really understanding, if we can learn to think symbolically instead of just in language, or instead of having our thoughts only motivated by our emotions, or having our experiences only motivated by materialism, which for the last 200 years, once again, with Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions having been in Capricorn, which is all about material reality and materialism, if we can begin to up-level our thinking to be in terms of image, symbol, intuition, and spiritual insight and understanding, it will transform our way of being in relationship to ourselves, each other, and our world. And so I am sharing these images and pictures with you to also help you begin to think symbolically. Now, what is Jupiter? If we look, and I'm going to see if I can stretch this, we look at the Wheel of Fortune, what we notice is we have the symbol of Aquarius, which is the symbol of a man, which has to do with how we think. We have the symbol of an eagle, which is the symbol of Scorpio, which is how do we process our emotions. We have the symbol of Leo the lion in this corner, and Leo is the symbol of our fire, our energy and passion. And we have the symbol of Taurus, the symbol of the bull, which is a symbol of our relationship to our body. These four aspects, these are the four elements, cardinal elements in astrology, representing our thoughts that can either be very expansive or very rigid and narrow. Our emotions, just like Scorpio represents, can be very deep, very painful, all of those challenging experiences, hurt, anger, fear, possessiveness, shame. Or they can be very positive emotions, joy, elation, bliss, connection, love. When we start looking at Leo, Leo represents our pure power and passion, which can be very positive in terms of creative expression, or likewise, it can be not so great in terms of getting lost in pride and needing a lot of ego gratification for what we've created. And likewise, we have Taurus. Taurus, the bull, represents that experience of are we persevering? Are we dedicated? Are we taking the time and making sure that things are being done in a very concrete way? Or do we become stubborn and immobile, getting stuck in our ways? Jupiter is suggesting we have the power to learn whatever it is we need to learn about how our mind works, how our emotions work, how our creative spiritual fire works, and how we integrate that into the actions we take in our body. We do that by being like the Sphinx, understanding the wisdom of all of our experiences, using the sword of discernment, the sword of discrimination, to recognize what bedevils us, what captures us and blocks us from being able to access the wisdom and the gifts of our full capacity. And like the snake, then we know what to hold on to and how to shed our skin and what to let go of. This is especially important right now. And as we expand our awareness, what have you learned, especially in the last year, because Jupiter and Saturn have been close to each other in Capricorn, with Pluto right there as well. What have you learned about yourself, your ideas and beliefs, your emotions, your creativity, and the positive healing actions you take so you can get off the wheel of karma and turn your consciousness around. And so I'm wondering, Natalie, I know I had asked people to write down a few ideas or thoughts of things that they had learned. Perhaps you can read a few of those and we can share them with everybody.
Yeah, there were some really beautiful learnings over the last year. Among them, a slower lifestyle, less external stimulation, taking better care of oneself, looking at important relationships, seeing now things that they had overlooked previously, turning difficult circumstances into opportunities for introspection and learning, staying neutral for the benefit of everyone and to accept and honor the feelings and views of others. Let's see if I can get a couple more.
Yes, and maybe, yes, a couple more would be great, and then we'll continue.
Concentrate more on professional skills. Also work on the word to learn how to keep my emotion. Oh, also work on my internal word to learn how to keep my emotion in peace. We learned how blessed we are to be living in relocation, personal. I'm not sure, Stuart, what that word is.
Well, so some of these learnings that we've had from the last year have been really important in terms of coming home to ourselves, building a new lifestyle that is, some have mentioned, moving slower, more introspective, um, understanding how to shift awareness in the face of hardship. This coming year, and starting again on solstice, we integrate these, and you'll notice how the world card, which is associated with Saturn, looks a lot like the Jupiter card. The difference being they're no longer reading the books. They have integrated them in such a way with the laurel wreath symbolizing championship, having accomplished the learning and integrating it now into a structure, into a strategy that you can live with for the coming year. So now these good learnings that you gained last year, it's time to really implement them and maintain them as a structure, strategy, and routine in your life. This will be really important in the year to come. Now, I want to mention that one thing that you can do tomorrow is a little ceremony for yourself. I like to suggest that you write on a piece of paper. It can be something as simple as, a sticky or an index card. Just write out and identify something that you've learned or a seed that you want to plant. Write that out during the solar eclipse. And then on solstice, light a candle and read it as a prayer, or perhaps dance your prayers or sing your prayers. Or what I like to do is I like to take my prayer and I burn it and I ignite it and imagine it with the flames warming and illuminating and bringing energy to my prayers if I set them on fire. So consider doing a little ceremony for yourself on solstice, as well as, starting it tomorrow, keeping your intention clear. Moving forward, what's really important is to understand how to continue working with these energies throughout 2021. Now, last year, January 12th, when I gave this talk before, we were in the year 2020. And 2020, I don't know if I'm going to be able to expand this or not. This is a picture of 2020. It's the Judgment card. And Pluto, Lord of Death and Birth. So we can either have our judgments kill us, take us into the underworld, abduct us, which is what Pluto does, or we can listen to the deeper calling in our hearts and souls and awaken to who we are and what we're really here for, which is the symbol of the judgment card with this man, woman, and child in the color gray. Gray is the color of wisdom, just like we get gray hairs as we age, hopefully as a sign of wisdom. We too can awaken to the wisdom by listening to the call of our own true spirits. This particular angel is the symbol of Gabriel, who is on his trumpet calling us to awaken. Now let's look what happens when we add up 20. 20 is 2 plus 0, which equals 2. We end up with the symbol of the high priestess. This is a description of where many of us have gotten lost when we look at our world. The high priestess is a symbol of how to be completely at peace instead of pulled pole to pole between the dark pillar of the challenges and the white pillar of the opportunities, the negative experiences and the positive experiences in life. How do we find the deeper teaching in all of the experiences and move beyond the question of either or? Now, if we look back at this year, we have been really struggling as a people globally, but especially in North America, with polarization. I'd like to mention that ever since the year 2000, we have entered into a 1,000-year cycle that is being led by the high priestess, by the question of how are we going to find a way to sit in peace between the two poles of experiences? How do we honor and recognize the challenges and the gifts that life brings us? She contains the secret of how we do that. And I just want to mention we've got 1,000 years to learn this one. So, we're entering into a period of 200 years. For the next 200 years, 20, and you can fill in the end. And then the next number is 21, and you fill in the end. In the 21st century that we're in now, and then the 22nd century that will be in 100 years from now. So happens that the number 21 is the Empress card. So the next 200 years are really about integrating the power and presence of the feminine spirit that lives in all of existence, including every human being, man, woman, child. One aspect of that is the high priestess, the one who uses the gift of intuition, symbolized by the moon on the crown of her head, the lunar cycles. What do we know about the moon? The moon reminds us that everything changes. It goes from full moon to crescent moon to no moon to crescent showing again to full moon again. We learn how to be with change without getting lost when suddenly we're in the dark moon phase where it looks dark. We know the moon is going to rise again. We're learning that right now. This is a really important lesson because from that, we then are able to give birth to a new kind of consciousness, a non-dual consciousness. It's symbolized by the creative potential that's represented in these beautiful pomegranates. That's the veil between these two pillars. The pomegranates contain within them, according to the Hebraic tradition, there are 613 seeds in a pomegranate that represent the different kinds of laws and guidelines from the Hebraic tradition that allow us to live in the world in a really good way, in a way that's in harmony and balance with ourselves, with each other, with all of life, and with the divine. So we begin to understand the mysteries and we are able to give birth to them. In the Empress card, it said that this dress that she is wearing is actually the veil that is behind the high priestess. We, in the next 200 years beyond this century that we're planting seeds for right now, it has to do with understanding our pure creativity and how is it that we access our creative potential in a way that nourishes all of us. Just as the high priestess represents the lunar aspect of the feminine, the empress represents Venus or Aphrodite, that loving, unconditionally loving aspect of our nature. The unconditionally loving aspect of our nature gives us the capacity to love our vulnerabilities, to love other people when they're vulnerable, to have compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. It also, as a feminine quality, represents love on every dimension: interpersonal love in relationship, humanitarian love, love for nature and being able to be an ally to all of life. She is the mother goddess that represents Mother Earth as well. On her crown, she has 12 stars, which represent the 12 signs of the zodiac or the 12 hours of day and night, recognizing that our creativity is expressed in different ways by different people who maybe represent these different signs of the zodiac. Likewise, with the 12 hours of day and night, we understand that it takes time for our creativity and our creative potential to come to be born. In the tarot, there are only 2 pregnant cards, and she happens to be one of them. So, this is a reminder also to be patient with ourselves when we look at the next 20 years. It's very important to recognize that while this last year was dealing with Pluto and Saturn together, on a numerological perspective, we're still going to be dealing with Pluto, Lord of Death and Rebirth, all the way through the rest of this century. Hopefully, in the next 20 years, we're shifting from death into the renewal and rebirth elements and aspects. And the seeds that we're planting now are about this transition into giving birth. Now, I do have to say that some of us may have a difficult birth. Those of us who have already done some of our own healing work in the past and are familiar with the psychic death, the what's called the dark night of the soul. Some of you have probably heard of that already, that we've already been through the darkness, have found an inner light that has guided us to renew ourselves. Even in the face of something like COVID-19, where our whole world changed literally overnight, we've been able to discover how to create benefit for ourselves. We'll be called upon in the months to come to act as midwives for others and being asked to be patient, to be compassionate, to understand the vulnerability, to not get lost going pole to pole as other people go pole to pole, but to remain poised and at peace and recognizing each of us is on a journey of the soul right now. What is it that's going to make the difference? Let's just take a moment and look at what is it that made a difference for you in the last year. Just reflect on what helped you get through the challenges of 2020. When we look at 2021, we recognize that it contains within it the experience of 2, 0, 2, 1. 0 represents the Fool. This is really interesting because the Fool is symbolizing also Uranus. Uranus is the ruler of the sign of Aquarius. Jupiter and Saturn are moving into Aquarius. So we're getting some of the positive energy of Uranus helping us this year. Last year, 2020, when Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto were all in Capricorn, there's a story about Uranus and Capricorn that I think is important to tell right now. Uranus is the creator and ruler of the universe, the Lord of the universe. His children, let me see if I can get this, there we go. His children, it was foretold, were going to usurp the throne. And so he swallowed his children so that he could stay in power. Well, Mother Earth wasn't really happy about that. And so Saturn came along and took over the universe by castrating Uranus. This is, again, such a really interesting story given what we're happening right now with 2021 equaling the number 3, which is Venus. When Saturn came and cut off Uranus's balls and threw them into the ocean, what's said is they began to fizzle and foam, and on that sea foam arose Aphrodite, the goddess of love. I rather like that story. It first of all shows us that the conflicts that we have been experiencing between society and structure and form and creativity and who's going to be in charge, the way to resolve that is through accessing Aphrodite, the goddess of love. How do we access the creative energy and potential of love that can allow for the resolution of that conflict? Now, what's so fascinating is Jupiter and Saturn also went through a very similar challenge. And we're right now in a change of ages. So we're seeing these kinds of archetypal conflicts symbolized through the conflict between father and son and who's going to rule, who's going to be in charge. When it came to Saturn, he was also told that one of his children would take over the throne. And so he ate all of his children, swallowed them up, and Rhea was not happy with this idea, so she saved Jupiter from that. And long story short, Jupiter came and actually ousted Saturn later in a very, not in the same quite rough manner, but took over the role of being in charge of the universe. And so we've been experiencing this conflict between how is authority going to be happening? And we're going to be seeing some of these same challenges around authority in the years to come. The key is in the year to come and for the next 20 years, instead of conflicts between creativity and form, between expansion and contraction, we're going to be bringing in the quality of 21, the power of the magician. What is the power of the magician? The power of the magician, and I'm going to pull him up here. The power of the magician is the symbol. Though we may be holding the candle with a flame on the top and the flame on the bottom. We may feel like we're burning the candle at both ends, so to speak, but this is really a symbol of greater understanding, infinite, universal wisdom and understanding, that the energy from above, the spiritual energy, the light from above, shines in everything that exists, including material reality. So it is about how do we expand our understanding and knowledge to perceive how everything in life is a representation of spiritual principle. And how do we learn from those principles in such a way that we become a channel for that and bring it into our world, just as he stands reaching to the heavens and directing the energy of the heavens, the divine energy, our essential true nature, bringing it here into the world. How are you going to bring your essential creative energy into the world? Now, the magician card says that we do this through the principle of Mercury. Mercury is the only god in the pantheon of Greek gods who was able to go all the way to heaven, Mount Olympus, onto the middle world of the earth, and into the underworld, and return from the underworld, coming back again to the earth and to Olympus. We are to develop the skill to be able to transcend, to be able to deal with reality as it is, and to be able to go deep into our own depths, discover the riches that are there, and to bring those riches forward back into our lives. Mercury is the symbol of communication. So, how do you commune and communicate with yourself, with your inner self and soul? How do you commune and communicate with others in your day-to-day life? And how do you commune with the infinite divine forces? So these methods of commune and communication include, obviously, developing the ability to listen, to speak, and to be able to negotiate. It's not enough just to hear and speak, but to be able to understand, what does someone else want and need? What do you want and need? And how do we both get what we want and need in a way that serves us, serves our world, serves heaven, if you will, serves God, and then also serves the soul of who we are and what we're really here for. This is the seed that's going to make the difference, that allows us to face what this year is about. 2021, when we add it all up, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1, it equals 5. Now, the number 5 is a really significant number. In numerology, it's about creativity. In the Tarot, it's associated with the Hierophant. And I have several images of the Hierophant here. Whoopsie, let me go back. Okay, I don't know how I will do this. There we go, one more back. Here's an example of the Hierophant that somebody symbolized as Chiron. Chiron is a healer. Here we have, he was the one who taught Asclepius all of the healing arts. Here we have a symbol of the Hierophantess Taliesin, who is the storyteller from the Arthurian legends. This version of the Hierophant is quite lovely as well. It's from the Thoth deck. And we have the symbol of the innocent child within our hearts and the wise one who is sharing the wisdom and teachings of experience. We have those elements that we discussed before of Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, and Taurus. And here in the Rider Waite deck, we have the symbol of the Pope. The Pope is the outer form from the Middle Ages of the spiritual teacher who is able to tell the teachings of spirit in such a way that anyone can understand them because he is familiar with the keys of wisdom and knowledge. Now it's time for each of us to discover the inner teacher and to be the inner teacher, sharing our teachings in the world in ways that allow the teaching from our own experience. I like to think of the healing art of storytelling that comes from sharing our sacred stories. The Hierophant is, I think, of the teacher in the school of hard knocks. And each of us have been through the school of hard knocks in the course of our lifetime. It is through our lived experiences that we have gained wisdom, insight, and understanding. And it's that which we are called upon to share with others this coming year. Now, let's look at where this fits in within the whole understanding of, from the perspective of the Tarot. There are 4 different suits that represent our personality. If we go back to the magician, you saw that he had a cup, a sword, a wand, and a pentacle on his table. Those represent the different dimensions of our being. The cup is our emotions. The sword is the sword of discernment of a clear mind. The pentacle talks about our physical material world. And the wand represents our spirit or our intuition. In addition to those 4 aspects of who we are at the personality level, we also have who we are in our essential nature as souls, growing and evolving in the course of our lifetime. And so the 22 cards of the major arcana describe the path of the soul as we go through life. The first 9, numbers 1 through 9, represent the path of initiation. This year, we happen to be dealing with the initiation of number 5. What are your life experiences, and how have they brought you wisdom and understanding that you are here to share with yourself and others? The numbers in the middle path are the path of karmic transformation and transmutation. But it's important to understand for the next 200 years, we're going to be dealing with 20 and 21. So for the next couple hundred years, we're going to be dealing with illumination and actualization. So now, what is it that is being illuminated and actualized for you this year based on the teachings of your life experiences? I recommend you journal on that a little bit. What have you learned thus far? Because this coming year, you will be tested. And I want to show you the tests of this year's initiation and the gifts that they open, because every test brings us a tremendous gift. In the Tarot, there are what I call 13 guardians, 13 challenge cards in the ego. We happen to have 4 of them this coming year. Some of these you may have already experienced and found your way through. So I'm going to share what they're about and what the gift is, so that when you face this, you can also instantly begin to go, oh yeah, this is not just anxiety and strife, which is the 5 of Wands, where you feel totally anxious. This is about understanding energetic boundaries and the ability to trust yourself. For the last 200 years, we've been understanding physical boundaries, but the 5 of Wands is energetic. So what do you do with your creative energy? And how do you create a structure and strategy to support your creative self? That's the 5 of Wands. It's associated with Saturn and Leo for those of you who are astrologers. The 5 of Cups is asking you to look at not only what has been lost, but what remains. Notice this fellow here is trying to get over to the house across the river, looking at what he's missing. But if he were to just turn around, he'd notice these two cups sitting over here and a bridge which allows him to cross over. Mars in Scorpio, how are you going to direct your emotional energy towards transformation this coming year? How do you recognize the challenges of disappointment and learn to be present with what is in a way that allows you to move forward in your life? That's one of the teachings of this coming year. This one is one that I've been dealing with. I keep pulling it, so I'm going to share it with you. I've become very familiar with it now. It is the Five of Swords. How have we picked up other people's ideas and detached from what has heart and meaning to us? What's important in this is it's about power struggles. And instead of engaging in power struggles where there's a winner and a loser, how do I instead cultivate kindness by understanding how others think and how I think, and ultimately, how do we come to think from our hearts, not just from our intellects, in a way that we don't lose our peace, but actually extend peace with the words we use and share with each other. And this one, I really think it's very important to focus on the Five of Pentacles, Mercury in Taurus. There may be many people this coming year who face economic hardships, who feel like this cripple out in the snow and the widow barefoot in the snow. But in the card, they're standing outside of a church. In medieval times, the church was always a symbol of sanctuary, always a place that one could go to find refuge. The refuge here is symbolized by Mercury and Taurus, being willing to go deep inside into your own inner depths to discover what do you truly need, and then to come forward in your life and to communicate your needs to others, but ultimately to communicate your needs to others who can actually help you fulfill your needs. So those three steps will be lessons and teachings for us this coming year. And to remember that we have the resources to help us, the resource of learning from life's experiences by expanding our awareness, creating new structures and strategies, by returning to peace instead of going pole to pole, and being able to accept and love ourselves and each other, including our vulnerabilities, including our boundaries, being able to hear yes and no equally so that we can extend the gifts that we have and share them with each other. So that's what 2021 is all about. And I really want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to share with you today. I would like to mention that Yoga Nova has invited me to share Learning the Tarot from January 17th for a 6-week period to February 21st. These were the universal lessons that our world is learning. But each of us also has personal lessons based on our birthday, and we'll be exploring that in the very first class. Like, what are you here to learn this year for you personally? And then we'll be looking at how to work with all of the symbols of the tarot. And that, again, if you're interested, please contact Yoga Nova. And Natalie, I really want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to share these teachings. I also want to share with you all and thank you all for knowing that your contribution, what you paid today, is supporting Women in Need Society. And I know we've raised a good amount for them. And likewise, in the class for Learn the Tarot, I will be making available my video library on the tarot. And I think, Natalie, maybe you can say a few words about this. I think is being recorded right now. Maybe you can say something about that before we close.
Uh, yeah, the recording, I'm going to be sending it to all of you that have registered for the session. So you'll have a record of what Dr. Hedva just shared. And as well, if you do choose to forward that along to anybody, we ask that you make a donation either to a charity of your choice, or perhaps frequent a local business in honor of this learning and in honor of forwarding it along, just keeping our local economy as strong as possible.
Yes, as I pointed out with that Five of Pentacles, really supporting yourself and others on concrete financial ways is very helpful. So make a commitment to do takeout if you're in lockdown from your favorite restaurant. Make sure to support a local business, or to, again, if you're sharing the link with someone, invite them likewise to extend support to their community members as well. Giving to charity or supporting a local business that they think could really benefit and needs a little help right now. And again, thank you so much, Natalie. I'm hoping that this was of benefit to those of you who are listening. And feel free to dash questions. I hope you can come to learn the tarot and begin to dive in more. We're going to be practicing reading with each other in the class as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hedva. There's lots of love flowing through. One question, what is the other tarot card that represents pregnancy?
Oh, the other is the Queen of Pentacles, and she is the highest level of mastery on the physical plane, that capacity to be creative and to bring our creations into the material world in really beautiful ways. Yeah, so she's the other pregnant card.
Thank you for that. And just a reminder to order direct from restaurants, because Skip the Dishes takes a huge chunk. So that's coming up in the messages.
Ah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hedva. That was so great. I really look forward. I'm taking the tarot course in January, and I'm so grateful for it and so much looking forward to learning more about all of this. It's just, I said in the newsletter today, I don't know if you know this, but it's a little bit like listening to Indiana Jones or something. Like it's like so interesting what you know about all this. Thank
Yes,
you.
and likewise with the recording, you can pause it and you can kind of digest it, think about it, journal on it, and then, share what you've learned with other people. So I really recommend that you consider that as well.
And then
Thank
a
you.
question about which tarot deck to use.
Okay, so you can really use any deck you like, because once you learn to think symbolically, colors are colors, numbers are numbers, the astrology is the astrology. I happen to use, because of the Western mystery tradition, I use the Rider-Waite deck. I used the Albano-Waite deck. I like the colors better. It's also from the Western tradition. It's showing people who are European descent. That's not required. That happens, Mid-Eastern and European descent. You may prefer a deck where it's a different symbology, perhaps all female or men and women, or a different kind of representation. Whatever deck you use, it's a deck that will speak to you. I will be teaching using the Albano-Waite deck, just because the colors are so easy and bright, and it's just so easy to interpret. You don't even have to know anything to create a story. So, but again, any deck is good. Yeah.
That's great. I think that the messages have slowed a little bit and it's a little bit past time.
Great.
So I'll keep scanning the chat messages as we close up. Any final words, Dr. Hedva?
Just really share the gifts that you have and who you are. That's the biggest gift that we have. And we're really, again, confirming that we were born for this time. We're ready for this time. And we're being called forth to be here, present at this time in history, which is a magnificent launch into a whole new cycle of time. And I think those are good final words.
Well said. Thank you so much. All right. I'm just going to keep scanning chat, so I'll be on for a few more moments.
Okay, very good.
A couple direct messages over here, so I'll try to reply to those.
Okay. And I think what I'll do is I'll just close my window, but I'll be here if there's any question that you want me to respond to. Okay.
Charmaine wants to know if you do private, tarot readings?
I do. I have a bit of a wait list right now, but I do. I think right now I'm probably scheduling into February, March. Yeah. And I really like to blend tarot with astrology. I find that to be a really good combination to look at what's happening in your life right now in terms of the larger cycles, as well as the tarot is great for specific questions. Yeah.
I'll just stop recording now.